Well, congratulations for coming back. I'm super impressed that the attrition rate wasn't too low. I've got a bet with myself that we're going to be finished a little bit before 2:30. That's what I would think. But anyway, let's see how we go. You'll have to be very good. So we're moving on to topic 2, creating representations of Australian identities, places, events and concepts. So this is the part, as Lisa told us in the last session, that you really do need to have some Australian content. It doesn't all have to be Australian content. Essential.
I can't hear you up the back.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to put my mic on. Okay. You feel like you're so wired up that everyone must be able to hear you.
Do you want a hand?
No, I think I'm right. All right, let's make sure that air conditioning doesn't go off during the session either, hey? All right. All right, so let's get our heads into the spaces. Different task this time around. We've had what's essentially interpreting task. This is a creating task. I'm going to handle this in much the same way that we did with the last one. So I'm going to present one central idea, but I'm going to present it hopefully in a way where you could see that a similar idea could be done with different sorts of texts, but keeping in mind that there are lots of other options. Topic 2 asks us, in topic 2, you asked to explore texts about Australian social groups. So this is, for me, this is a big conceptual teaching, is to make sure they understand what we mean by Australian social groups. And the examples from the syllabus are youth, sports people, tradespeople, rural and urban dwellers, men and women, musicians and artists. So those are fairly big groups. You know, perhaps it might be more interesting to get quite specific with your social groups, you know, what kind of youth? I don't know if I'm going to do essays, but I probably could in my school. Your kids are going to need to be able to consider and explain how the texts that they study represent identities, places, times and concepts. So they're taking texts, they can see that there are social groups represented, and how are those social groups represented in those texts? And then and then they're going to have to apply these knowledge to describe. So that's kind of what the back end teaching of this topic to me is going to look. And over here, to me, this is what the lessons look like, sound like, feel like in their first half. So are your students, you know, developing and explaining reasoned points of view, you know? Look, I don't like footballers. Look at that guy in The Bachelor. He seems like he's such a nice guy, but what a pig, or whatever. So they're going to need to not just say that as an opinion, but be able to explain how that works. How are we led along in The Bachelor to believe that, what's his name? Nick Cummings is this really nice guy, classic Australian, incredibly good communicator, really emotionally, you know, so can they tell you that they're led along to think like that, but then in that text structure at the end, how is that kind of undone? How is our opinion about him and by association, Aussie larrikins like him presented in that text? So that those sorts of conversations will be interesting ones to have in your room. In today's session, I'm just going to talk about my idea or a couple of ideas for IA4, and then how you might go about interpreting in IA4 and how you might go about constructing or creating in IA4. This is such a lovely old photograph, and this is the photographer there. Hopefully you'll see how that's going to go. All right, so here's the actual task. Can you just have a read of can everyone see the task there? It's pretty big. So the focus there is them creating representations that position an audience. Classic critical literacy task. And where your focus in your popular culture text is, that popular culture text is the springboard for their creative response. So, you know, I'm not going to do the Bachelor for this. So if we were studying the Bachelor, what kind of creative response could we come up with? You know, what are we going to do with Nick? We're going to turn it around. Are we going to make him line up and be chosen by some of the women or something like that? Their actual task is to create a written text where they invite an audience, again, a specified audience. So the last one, you had to come up with a context, an audience, a purpose for your task. In this one, you're not just going to say, here's you as student and me as teacher, and you have to write an essay, a creative essay of some kind. It has to be real audience and purpose that invites the reader to take up a position. All right, so enough of that because you can look up that easily, but here's where I think the pressure point is for this task. And I'm going to try and deliver that message to you by playing genre bingo. This is going to be the worst, most terrible game of bingo you have ever played in your life because A, it's boring because it's about genre, and B, everyone has the same card, so no one's going to win at all. Anyway, so can I get you to go to the back of your handout, please, and have a look at your very lame genre bingo card. It's double-sided there. I've just spread it out a little bit. And look, I'm not even giving you counters. That's how lame this game of bingo is. And also, no prizes. I actually don't think you could really fairly call this genre bingo, to be honest. Anyway. All right. So what we're going to do is have a look at the QCAA's suggestion for this creative response, and I want you to circle, underline, highlight. These handouts are going to be available on the website or whatever, so don't worry about wrecking this one. It's been kindly provided by Lindsay Williams, bless him. So I'm going to give you the suggestions that have come from on the QCAA website. I want you to see if you can identify which of the respondings, which of the genres are there. All right, let's have a go. All right, so if they were writing an opinion piece on what makes an Australian, what would that be? If you were writing an opinion piece, have a go. See if you can circle the one there that looks like an opinion piece. Let's just borrow this for a second. Decide on the family first. Is it a story, an argument, or a response to a cultural text? Got it? Opinion piece on what makes an Australian. All right, you got that one? All right, have a go at this. I'm not going to test you. It's way too late on a Sunday for testing. All right, what if you got them to write a letter, blog, or series of journal entries? Have a go there. Which genre or genres would that be? If you're writing a journal entry, what would that be? Yeah, that's where I'd put it. What about a letter? What's that? Maybe. Is a blog even a genre? Is it a mode? Is a blog a mode? Anyway, I don't know. All right. Let's have another go. You probably put something like recount there, did you, maybe? A letter or a journal entry is likely to be a recount if it's in role as a character. Blog is a trick question. I believe a blog is a mode, not a genre, but I could be wrong, but I'm not really sure because I don't really know what a blog is. A narrative or script, where are you going to put that one? Find its family. All the genres are like us. They all live in little families. So if I asked you to write a short story or a script, some kind of narrative, where are you going to put that? You can circle that one. So the old fill a gap or silence in the text. What about this one? What if you decide, someone talked to me actually about this before the break. What if you want them to pitch an idea for a new documentary? Or podcast or reality, what if they're going to come up with an idea and pitch their idea to a group of television producers? Probably not all that realistic, is it, that they'd be going off doing that now, but where are you going to put that? What sort of genre is it? is it a persuasive genre? Yeah. It kind of pitches an argument, I think. Certainly not a discussion. All right, what about this one? A proposal for an Australian, I don't know what a mod is, an Australian mod or version of a video game. A proposal for an Australian model version of a video game. What's that?
Modifications.
Is it?
So like Monopoly, you know how you have the British version, the American version. You might have Bondi version or something, you know, with the NIM. Things are modified.
Ah, Australian mod. Mod for modified. Can't we just use the whole word?
Oh, you're not down with it?
I'm totally not down with it. I know who Cardi B is though. All right. And finally, an imaginative text that develops an Australian identity, place or event studied in a popular culture text. Where are you going to put that one? Good luck. All right, let's come back together, please. All right, so can the room help me out? Remembering, I'm going to give you lots of chances to talk, so if you want to cycle back to finish this conversation, I'm not going to be offended at all. What do you think I think? So I've been inviting you to read this page from the syllabus in a particular way. What did I want you to notice about the tension in this task? Anyone? So many genres to choose from. Joe?
I think for me, this has like the problem that we have with the 2010 syllabus before the clarification around evaluating and creating meaning.
Yep.
It asks the kids to deconstruct in order to construct, so I think
Yep.
it's a little bit over.
Yeah, so this is, I'm not saying that the QCAA has got this one wrong. It's actually a really exciting unit to do, but can you remember in the last session I suggested I would want to start by deciding on what the focus was? That's where I saw the tension is working out what you're trying to do with this unit. For this unit, for me the big tension is what genre are we going to be focusing on, because it's from all over the place on that genre map. All of these are right, but the choice is huge. And what you decide to do with your interpreting and responding in this unit is going to depend a lot on where you want to take the kids with it. So if you take one thing away from this session, could it be go home and decide what genre you're going to do there and be really clear about what genre you are going to do. I'm going to look at one example here today, but keep in mind that all of these others are possibilities. Yep. You would have to ask a QCAA person about that, and that's what the endorsement process is for. I think you totally, anyway, I might get to that in a second. All right. Actually, that's a pretty good segue, because I'm going to ask you to have another look at this for me. Can you just go back to your conversation and on your paper, just 2 to 3 genres you might think of doing for this task. So where are you at with this task? And what are the strengths and weaknesses of that? I've suggested a website is one, or for me, I won't be doing a website, even though I have done websites in the past, because it's too fragmented. I feel like it doesn't give that extended writing opportunity. I'd be worried about quality. What do you guys think? What are you going to do? All right, let's come back together. Did anyone have conversation they'd particularly like to share? Genres that they feel they definitely would or wouldn't want to do here? No? Rather we just move on and get to the napping part. Oh, yes, sorry.
Sort of knocked the website idea down because it's so complex in some ways and there's so many layers to it. We just felt for the time available and for our own technical knowledge, it might be a bit too difficult to do.
Yep, okay.
Sorry, I know that's the one you've got up there.
Yeah, that's look. I think people are going to struggle with the website a little bit, but it's horses for courses, isn't it? If you've got a particular group who are really strong with that, with websites. I have a real interest in it. Maybe it's going to work for you. Look, I am going to stick to one approach here. Maybe it's a bit pedestrian, but hopefully I wasn't pedestrian the last one, so I'm going to be pedestrian in this one, so I can get away with it. When I looked at this, again, I went to those suggestions and I thought, what makes the most sense for me? What would I like to work with? And I like this idea of a narrative or script that fills the gap or silence. I quite like the idea of I like the idea of doing a truly imaginative text. That's what I want to do. I don't particularly want to write an opinion piece that constructs an identity. Now, that doesn't mean that that's not going to be a really fantastic idea in somebody else's classroom. This is just I'm probably being selfish. This is what I would like to do. So this is what I came up with. Again, for a particular text, you could do this same idea with lots of other texts. I don't want to put it up because I'm afraid you won't like it. Okay. So my idea is this. What if Jenny Law came to stay at your place? So maybe we're studying the family law. Fantastic series. By the time they're in grade 12, perfectly okay to watch. And what I want them to do is, because they've done biographical writing in grade 11 and what have you, we're going to look at the family law and representations of particular Australian groups, social groups. So it could be Chinese Australians, but equally it could be youth or mothers or partners in marriage. If they're going to use this, maybe I'd ask them to do some kind of Venn diagram so they can check. Well, they can check their racism at the door, perhaps, making sure, because the family law has lots to say about families, not necessarily just Chinese, Australian families. Broken families where divorce is a factor is really interesting in the family law. But anyway, what I'm hoping they're going to do is they're going to take Jenny or some other character and bring that archetypal character into their own space. And what happens? What's the story that happens? I've chosen two possible genres here, narrative or recount. I'm going to try and make it as clear as I can why I've chosen both of those, why both of those are an option. But you in your classroom, you might just decide to go one or the other, and that's perfectly fine. Here's some ideas I had for a way, if you like that idea for a task, that you could do it a bit differently from that. So maybe you do, maybe you look at the Sunbaker from the first slides. That is a popular culture text, I believe. It's a black and white photograph, very famous Australian photographer, Max DePayne, depicting the head and shoulders, of the man lying on the beach. And my idea is how Harold Salvage could explore the city in 2018, sort of what happens there. Maybe you're going to... I love the idea of doing Ali's wedding. I think that would be a really nice text to study, again, depending on your context. And maybe his father, Maddie, accidentally gets an invite to your post-formal party. How would that go? What about Farmer Joe from this meme? Maybe you're going to take him to the wood, maybe you're at Nambour High School or wherever, and you're going to take Farmer Joe to the Woodford Folk Festival with you. How would that go? If you want to get into, I love the idea of vintage text. I love the idea of looking at Archie comics and Riverdale. I think that'd be amazing for that for topic 1. But what about Ginger Meggs comes with you to your favourite restaurant for dinner or something like that? Or even Jess Mauboy is a guest at your school musical. What could happen there? So lots of different creative possibilities for this kind of text. I'm sure that you're going to have ideas of your own when the time comes. But my question to you is, I guess, where are you going to be at with your text type? Do you want to do something really creative? If so, what? Or do you like the idea of doing more like an opinion piece where you deliver a message, you present a particular construction of social identity to an audience? Does everyone follow what I mean? There was a question over here about how can those opinion pieces and what have you be creative? I think they're taking a very broad, help me out here, Joe and Leanne, I think they're taking a fairly broad definition of creative here. Yes? I think they are. I think that they're saying creative could be you are an opinion column writer and you're going to write a piece in the Courier Mail talking about how dreadful the young people are at their post-formal parties or whatever. I really should have prepared a better example there.
We had the conversation. I mean, the thing now with genres, they're becoming so slippery and hybridised anyway. It's like,
Yeah, can you make them more truly, truly creative?
putting the confines around expectations and generic
Yeah,
structure, and
yeah.
that's about how you're going to model it explicitly.
Yeah. Is it creative to have Nick Cummins write an opinion column? You know, tell his side of the story in the Courier Mail. I bet you're not going to find him doing that. But could that be a go? So, again, chance for talk. Here are the ideas from QCAA. What kind of idea do you like? What kind of idea do you like? Because remember, this is going to have to be the starting point. Where are you headed? Yeah. It's like interrupting kids when they're actually reading or writing in the classroom. Hey, it's really hard to do. All right. So I don't want to labour that anymore because I think what you want to take away is here's the challenge. Make sure you know what you want them to create and let that guide your approach. I'm going to suggest Queer Eye is great. Has anyone seen a newer series of Queer Eye? Yeah, okay. So the newer Queer Eye is a different group of people and they have this one episode, and you could do this as your full text study if you like. It's not an Australian text, but it does have an Australian social identity represented in it. They go to Yass in rural Australia and they meet George. Bless George. So here are the Queer Eye guys and here's George. And what I like about this image is the way that it presents a juxtaposition. And when you're working with your essential English kids, they might find it difficult if you just give them George to see the Australianness or the rural Australianness in George. But if you show them George against the Queer Eye guys, I feel like they're going to see it a bit easier. I have a couple of things to say about those groups when we finish this activity, but I just thought in the meantime it might be worthwhile for who hasn't seen the newer Queer Eye? Right. And you can't assume all your kids have seen, just because you think a text is popular, you can't assume they've seen it because quite honestly, we have students, I swear they don't do anything but play video games. All right, let's have a look, see where these guys are coming from. So just by way of context, these guys aren't from New York. The original Queer Eye guys represented New York. This new group is from Alabama, I think, so from a pretty different place. And they've got all different stories themselves. Let's have a look.
Boys, you ready? The original show was fighting for tolerance. Our fight is for acceptance. Let's do this.
I'm excited, I don't know what to expect. I like the fact that it helped me get out of my comfort zone.
I think my dad is lonely.
I want her to be excited about it.
Brittany is surviving, and I need him to start thriving. How long does it take for this to occur?
Like 2.5 minutes.
Whoa! There's a lot going on in here. There's no way that that's acceptable anywhere other than... God, there's no way you brought that.
I wanted to look inside it and see the possibility of a different kind of love. I want to get him space that he can entertain a potential lady friend. It's okay to have confidence in yourself.
Ooh, yes, balance, yes, symmetry.
It's cool, it's young. You actually look 33. I see the man that he is and the man that he wants to be.
I'm married for 5. Let's break that down. Let's unpack that.
We all got to come together in a way where we can understand each other.
You gotta show me how good I like to be if I just care.
All of this only works because you're ready for it.
Gay, straight, the common thread that holds everything together is that we just want to be loved.
Netflix. What would we do without Netflix? All right, so I guess something I want to point out here is, like, I love this idea that they've come up and declared the purpose of the text. So the original Queer Eye was about approval and this, or tolerance, and this new one is about acceptance. That would be a really interesting thing to explore. Lots of ideas about culture there that you could play with. I've written down something here. I try not to read things out too much, but it was, it sounded good to me, and I didn't have enough time to learn it by heart. So there's a point for me here. I don't think you need to teach your essential English kids about metonymy, the idea that a one can stand for a many. So George is only one man, but he stands for a larger group. He stands for rural Australian men. And I think you can see some of the obvious difficulty with this and any such stereotyping when you answer a question that I have for you here about how men are represented. These 5 Queer Eye guys, so just in the way that George doesn't stand for all rural Australian men really, the Queer Eye guys don't really represent American men, do they? Or even gay men, or do we want to ask our kids, will rural men in America have more in common with George or the Queer Eye guys? There's lots of great conversations I feel like you can have there. But I'm going to get you to do this. So those kinds of critical conversations I think are really good to have with our kids. To what extent is George rural Australian man? How can we, are we just stereotyping him here? How is that text working? But the way I would get kids towards that kind of conversation might be something like this. And I thought maybe you wouldn't... Actually, no, I'm not going to ask you to have a go with it because, we'll get out of here more quickly if we don't, and I think you got the idea. But what I would want to ask them is, who's participating here? Who is George? He's a 54-year-old cattle farmer. He's a former rodeo cowboy. Get them to describe him in detail, and the same with the Queer Eye cast. What social group does George represent? Because we have to make sure that this unit is about Australian social groups. Who could he represent? You can do the same with the family law. Describe that setting. What is Yass like? Do a little bit of research about the social context. What kind of gestures and expressions? So you could really just analyse here. Where's George looking up into the sun, with his half sunburnt, half tan face out from under his hat? And what are these guys doing? They're doing the full YMCA on the Yass letters, yeah? And then you can talk about composition as well, the way that those texts are composed. So lots of opportunities to work with shorter texts. It's still images from short popular culture texts, American popular culture texts that could be reinvented for something Australian. But this, I guess, was my idea. Once you take that with kids, what if we took George somewhere into our space? Get your kids to think about where they are, what their place is like, and what would George do in their space? The critical questions for me here are, will what they create challenge or reinforce those ideas presented in the original text? Does that make sense? So you're going from looking at this text, coming up with your idea, but the creative is that they have to work out how they've been invited to think about George is going to be used by them to challenge or reinforce that. So are we going to write a story where George is vulnerable in our space or where George is powerful in our space? How's he going to react there, and how's that going to affect the kind of story that you write? I do have... there's a note here. Who was talking to me about genre, about narrative potentially, who has concerns? Who has concerns about a short story, like a classic narrative, being really quite difficult for essential English students? Yeah, I mean, it's a classic English piece, isn't it? And I don't think you can defend it in its own right, by its own right, as a popular culture. Like, our kids are just not reading short stories, are they? Not in essential English. Actually, most people don't read short stories, do they? But what I've suggested is that you could either write a recount or a narrative. If my class was decently, you know, I think there's going to be a fair variety of ability in my class, and I want to keep in mind that there's a key difference between a narrative and a recount. So a narrative has to have a complication that is resolved for the end of the story. A recount is recounting events and really kind of foregrounding the emotional reactions of the participants to those events. So, for example, here's an excerpt from a short story by Tim Winton. It says, a hot day, a very hot day on the plains, a very hot day up in the ranges too. The Australian sun had got up suddenly with a savage swoop as though he was angry at the still coolness of early morning and was determined to drive the cattle who were munching complacently in the long, rich grass of the swamp back up under the hills among the thick she oaks. Thanks, Tim Winton, for the longest sentence in the world. It seemed to be a settled thing on the part of the sun to get up hotter and hotter every morning. He even went down at night with a red face, as much to say, take care, I shall be hotter than ever tomorrow. All right, so some potential there for really getting into a proper narrative. So if your kids have an idea for George that amounts to a significant complication, some way he goes into the space and immediately encounters a tension that must be resolved, or a complication that must be resolved, then you've got a short story right there. But if you've got this kind of thing, has anyone seen the podcast Fierce Girls? It's for kids younger, so it's basically anecdotal recounts about really powerful good women. So this is Lane Beachley, and it's read by who's Sally, what's her name, does the hurdling? Sally Pearson. So it's Sally Pearson reading the story of Lane Beachley, and it's about the time when she found out that she was adopted, all right? So, boom, his words hit her with more force than any wave had ever knocked her from the surfboard. Boom, she could see his lips moving, but her mind was filling with the same white noise. So if they had this kind of event that they wanted to share, so if he found out some piece of information and he processes that and it goes through a series of events, maybe we're just going to do a recount, you know? You find out that information. What's your emotional reaction? What do you do next? There's no big problem here to resolve. It's what happens in that space. And that, as a creative task, is completely okay for Essential English. Those two genres together would be as far apart as I would take genres in an Essential English classroom. If I had a decent Essential English class or a very small class, perhaps, I would allow them to have their idea and work with them on deciding, is there enough here for a short story, or is this going to be a recount? Is this about the emotional reaction to the event? Am I making any sense? Because I feel like, okay. I feel like I just haven't got any more sense to make. All right. Okay, before we finish up today, I did want you to have an opportunity to talk with each other a little bit more about where you see your task going. How's it going to be creative? If you've got your idea, what kind of interpreting or creating are you going to do? We might come back in together just for this last little bit. It's great to see such great conversation. I have become aware, though, that it feels like a storm is coming, and so we're going to want to wrap up, I think. Like, I feel like actually, I don't feel like I need to drive home. I feel like my husband is going to want me to drive home because he doesn't like me out in the storms. But we did, I thought, an opportunity for a question or two before we finished up. I did have one over here, which is that, what's your name? Michelle. Something that Michelle really wants to know is what texts other people are thinking of studying. So I've suggested, I like doing American-born Chinese. I've got a few up there. Like what texts have you got? Have you got it? I'm just going to ask each table group to just call out a text that they think they like doing with this group or are intending to do. Just to help Michelle, you know, it won't be any use to anyone else, just Michelle.
Our idea was Chris, Lily, We Could Be Heroes.
Chris, Lily, We Could Be Heroes, great. Over here, any text? Yep. Yeah, they like the idea of. I love the idea. Is that I don't know if I could get away with doing Black Mirror, but I love it.
Just repeat it, Julie, please.
Black Mirror. Do you know Black Mirror? You absolutely. That's your homework. That would be for IO3. Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, not Australian. Black Mirror wouldn't be Australian, so...
Black Mirror is an Australian. You don't have to study an Australian text here. You do have to do representations of Australian identity, and I think the person was actually thinking about IA3 for this one anyway. What text do you guys like? I'm going to put you all on the spot, so you know, be ready.
The story of Tom Brennan, I suppose.
Yeah, lots of people do the story of Tom Brennan for a novel. It seems to go over really well. Well done. American Born Chinese is my big...
Deadly Anna.
Deadly Anna, people as a novel or a movie?
Both.
A book. Yep, lovely. What do you guys like?
I know we are going to do
Tom Brennan. Yep. Oh my goodness, everyone does Tom Brennan.
No, the new Tourism Australia ad.
The new Tourism Australia ad, yeah, there's a whole lot in there, isn't there? Yeah, that's really good. Okay, everyone listening, because you might get an idea that you like.
I'm doing Tim Winton's Breath with the film.
The film Breath. Oh wow, that's a really challenging film to do. Good on you.
The December Boys.
Oh, the December Boys. Yeah, good. Yep.
We're doing Running Man.
Oh, you do the Running Man. Well, you read the Running Man. And do they read it? Excellent. All right.
The Merger.
What's the merger?
It's coming up. It's an AFL film.
Oh, AFL film. Oh, what's that recent one with the AFL? Yeah, Footy Rules or what? No. Yeah, what's that called? Yeah, Playing for Keeps. That'd be a good one to look at. All right, yeah. Oh, Footy Wives is an Australian social group. Fantastic. Mystery Rose. Mystery Road. Okay, I've not seen it, but it sounds interesting. Okay, yeah. There's some really great series, aren't there? Okay.
When Michael Met Mina by Reza Abdel Fattah. It's a new one.
It's a novel.
Yes, it's a novel.
Yeah.
It's like modern day looking for Brandy, but girls a refugee. Privileged.
When Michael met me. Yeah. And last one.
Most has been said, but the name and property of the clan is a playtext.
Property of the Clan is a playtext. Yeah, that's interesting. You know, I was talking to Mel Wild. She did the English section for us, and she always did lots of plays and poems with her English communication class. I think we shouldn't discount plays and poems, even if it's just reading to our students. All right. Are there any other questions in the room? Can you please remember that all of the resources that have been shared today are available on the website. If you have any trouble accessing them, that's fine. If there's anything you'd like from me in particular, come and see me. I'll give you my email address. And thank you to Leanne for staying with us today and presenting, and to all of you for coming.